My name is Seraphim Michalenko of the Congregation of Marians of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I have been the vice postulator for North America in the canonization cause of Saint Maria Faustina Kowalska, whom Jesus called the secretary and apostle of his divine mercy. I am now going to speak about the image and the feast of Jesus, the divine mercy, as revealed to the church and the world through Saint Maria Faustina Kowalska as the principal elements of that message. Two priests who belonged to the Congregation of Marians, who were the first to learn about the revelations in the United States from one of our priests who came from Poland via Moscow, Siberia, and Japan, miraculously arriving in our country on an expired visa. And he was fleeing the Nazis in his native Warsaw. He promised that if he would reach his confreres in the United States, he would spread this message to the end of his life. And this was hardly 2.5 years after the saintly death of Saint Faustina Kowalska in October of 1931. He came to the States just before Pearl Harbor, which was in December. He arrived in May. Our fathers heard his story of how he received the message from Sister Faustina's own spiritual director, who was at that time in the city of Vilnius, then in Poland, but presently the capital of Lithuania. And he began to fulfill his promise, and the fathers took up the message and received permission from the Archbishop of Baltimore, Washington, to publish materials on these. And this is how they began to spread it. One of the priests was from my own hometown parish, and he would visit my parents every time he was home on vacation or between school. And we learned from him already in 1944 about these messages. And we had an image of the Divine Mercy, thanks to him, in our home. And shortly after, while I was still in high school, I entered the minor seminary of the Marian Fathers and learned more about the message and devotion, and was connected with the priests who ardently spread it. And this is how I came into contact with it. The original material was brought by Father Joseph Jarzembowski, as I mentioned, from Poland through Russia and Japan to the States. But it was only when I was assigned as vice postulator for Faustina's cause that upon my visit to Poland, which coincided with Pope John Paul II's first visit as Pope to Poland, I was able to bring out photographs of the corrected manuscript of St. Faustina's writings. And since they could not be published in Poland at the time, because the communists very much restricted Catholic publications, we prepared them for print in the States. And then they were actually printed, the first Polish version of her diary, in Rome, and then there, with a shipment of the Vatican newspaper in Polish, they were taken to Poland in time for the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the apparition of our Lord to Sister Faustina and the beginning of her mission. This message is immediately received beautifully by the laity, and I can say that this spreading of the message and devotion to the Divine Mercy is the greatest grassroots movement in the whole history of the Church, by the fact that it spread so quickly, so widely, and so deeply. My only concern is that not too many of the clergy are ready to join that movement, and the people complain mostly about that. So we are happy to be able to address groups of the clergy in order to show them that this is not the private devotion of a Polish pope because of a Polish visionary, but that this is the most important message for the world today, because the Lord told Sister Faustina twice, mankind will have no peace. And the word actually would mean security until it turns with trust to my mercy. And his complaint was that people don't trust him enough. And particularly souls consecrated to him do not trust him enough. And that hurts him very deeply. So we would like to get the message out to as many as possible, as well as possible, so that they would be able to embrace it as something that the world needs now in preparation for our Lord's final coming. For he told Faustina that she is to prepare the world for his final coming. And the Blessed Mother also emphasized that to her in a vision. I'm just wondering to what extent the clergy are aware of what's coming out of Rome with regard to various things, but in particular those concerning the Divine Mercy message in devotion. The Holy Father, the present one, ever since the first time that he celebrated Divine Mercy Sunday on the actual anniversary of Pope John Paul II's death, emphasized that he received his magisterium on the Divine Mercy as a legacy that he accepts wholeheartedly and mandates to the Church. Before Cardinal Wojtyła became the Pope, people in Poland were bombarding him with requests that he should obtain from Rome the permission to start the process for her beatification. He told them, well, her writings and forms of devotion are forbidden, and they were for 20 years. But they said, no, she's a saint, you've got to do something about it. So when he came to Rome for the last session of the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council, his friend says, look, there's Cardinal Taviani from the Doctrine of the Faith. Why don't you go and ask him what we should do about this? So they met him after the procession, after the opening of the Congress, of the last session of the council, and they presented the problem that the people were giving the cardinal. And he says, what, you haven't begun yet? Do it before the witnesses disappear. And so he immediately telephoned his helper bishop to begin the process of gathering the witnesses and getting the information for the beginning of the process. In 2002, the Holy Father went to Poland to dedicate the Basilica in honor of the Divine Mercy close to St. Faustina's tomb. And it was there after Holy Communion that he said, who would suspect that this young man who worked in the quarry right under the hill where Sister Faustina was buried would one day dedicate this church in honor of the Divine Mercy. The boy who wore wooden shoes during the war and would stop in the chapel there to pray sometimes. And actually, he wrote his second encyclical on the theme of the Divine Mercy, Rich in Mercy, when he had not even read St. Faustina's diary. The diary was read to him while he was convalescing after the assassination attempt in the hospital. His closest friend, Cardinal Descour, who was not a cardinal at the time, read the diary to him. And at the same time, he asked that all the pertinent documents to Fatima be brought to him for him to review. And so that's when he first found out about the essence of her revelations. He did not know them before, but everything he wrote in the encyclical is one of the best expositions on Divine Mercy that even non-Catholics readily recognized before much comment was done by Catholic theologians. One non-Catholic theologian defined trust as the courage to accept acceptance. Many people are afraid of God. They only see him as one who throws thunderbolts. And the Lord once told Faustina, in the Old Testament, I came with threats, so to speak, through the prophets, but today I come to you with the message of mercy to the world, so that they would turn with confidence to me.